Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to welcome you to our MyHack Learning Community event on embracing dignity of risk. My name is Liz Hannon. I'm a white woman with brown hair and glasses wearing a pink and white striped shirt. I'm one of the members of the MyHack work group. During the presentation, please use the chat to type questions and we'll get to them during the Q&A at the end. The recording of this event will be available later on our website, and closed captioning is enabled. If you need any support to access this, please let us know in the chat. And we'll be doing some visual descriptions of our slides for accessibility. This slide shows a logo with Minnesota Inclusive Higher Education Consortium written in gold lettering across a blue shape of the state of Minnesota. Next slide. And as we begin this event, we would like to acknowledge that we're standing on the rightful homelands of Indigenous peoples. It's their current and continued displacement that allows the state of Minnesota to exist today. And as part of ICI, we're committed to addressing racism, ableism, and all forms of oppression to ensure inclusive communities. So without further ado, we're excited to introduce our speakers today. We're very fortunate to have our presenters, Chris, Megan, and Stephen here. Chris Worth is a community organizer, educator, writer, and visual artist with a disability. He teaches 2 courses in the UMSL Succeed program. Megan Rooney-Cron is an assistant professor at UMSL, where she teaches the Transition Issues and Planning course. And Stephen Shoemaker is a senior in the Succeed program at UMSL. Stephen plans on pursuing a degree in education and working as a middle school PE teacher. And now I'll turn it over to Chris Worth. Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. So what we're going to cover today is what is dignity of risk, and we're going to talk about different models of dignity of risk, and as they're sort of envisioned in post-secondary education programs. And then, because we always like to give some practical tools, we're gonna talk about 5 steps of assessing opportunities for dignity of risk. And then, of course, everybody's favorite section, the question and answer. Next slide, please. Okay. Who informed this presentation? Okay. Inclusive educators, researchers, people with disabilities, and literature on dignity of risk. And if you could drop there's a hyperlink that we're going to drop into the chat, and that hyperlink will have lots of info on it about dignity of risk and some other resources. Okay, next slide, please. So who are you? Now, we know that there are a ton of people in this virtual room today. So if you could just share a little bit about yourself in the chat, just to get us warmed up and see the kind of diversity of interests. Next slide, please. So my favorite thing to talk about, what is dignity of risk? Well, this term was sort of coined in 1972, and is a real response to how we sort of bubble wrap people with disabilities. And as a person, as a burgeoning scholar myself, and a person with a disability, I can say that that bubble wrapping even applied to me. When we say dignity of risk, we mean everyone should have the right to make mistakes. Everyone should have the right to flub up, right? Sometimes, though, for some reason in the community of people with disabilities, we don't, we kind of expect our people, our community, to always be on, be on their toes, as it were, right? And we don't build in chances for risk. So today we're going to talk about and normalize the idea of building risk into our everyday. And we're going to offer, when Dr. Megan Rooney Crone takes the mic, we're going to offer a whole spectrum. So not everybody is in the same place to examine risk as, say, one of my students, like Stephen Shoemaker, but everybody can get there. Everybody can get there, and we'll explain what there means as we move along. Next slide. Oh, sorry guys, I should be describing, especially this slide. The others, but there's a photo on this slide which I love, of a sort of human figure wrapped in bubble wrap, laying across a set of stairs, and that's to signify that whole idea of bubble wrap, which is a real thing, right? A lot of us know it. Okay, it's next slide. So, the world in which, I'm going to leave you with a quote. The world in which we live is not always safe, secure, and predictable, right? I had a bunch of technological issues happen with my phone just before this presentation. But okay, to finish, any person, any person has their fair share of risk. Experiences, who has their fair share of risk experiences, is further, I'm going to start that over. And I know I'm on a time crunch, but all right, I'm a little nervous. The world in which we live is not always safe, secure, and predictable. To deny any person their fair share of risk experiences is to further cripple them for healthy living. It's important, right, to acknowledge that even a thing like this, even a presentation, can be risky if you have, for example, fears of reading out loud, right? So as we move forward, let's examine how we can use risk to build confidence and other things like that. All right, next slide. Okay. So Megan, I think this is.
This one's yours. So if you can click the next slide, the principles will come up one by one.
Okay. So sorry, Dr. Rooney. So some philosophies of dignity of risk. All right, next. The right decision is not contingent on making or the right decision is not contingent on making the right decision. What that means is, I mean, as a younger person, I made a lot of mistakes, right? Growing up, right? That should not preclude my access to the rest of the world, right? Those mistakes added to who I am. Next bullet point. You can't learn. Oh, this is a normal. You can't learn to swim in the parking lot of the pool. We have to get wet. We have to take risks. We have to kind of be baptized into life in order to learn, right? You can't learn while sitting out on the side. Next bullet point. Supports and services. Supports should serve students, not families, staff, or administrators. Too often, even the idea of protecting someone, that really is because of the person who's doing the protecting's fear, right? So, like, I needed to be pushed out of the nest in order to become the person I am today, the PhD student that I am today, right? So, and sometimes that was uncomfortable for my dad, who wasn't a hospital administrator, right? He wanted things to be very codified, right? So, sometimes we have to do the pushing, and sometimes the pushing isn't the person with the disability that, but the people who support us. Next slide. Oh, next bullet point. Sorry. Risk provides opportunities to recognize and resist abuse. So, for so many of us with disabilities, we are often kept from experiencing sort of the nasty bits of life, right? Well, that causes us to be a little bit more, unaware of our of the world around us, and there is evidence, right? There is actual evidence that says that people with disabilities, when taught things like sex ed from a sexuality positive perspective, actually can that the risk to them for being abused and neglected is taken down tenfold. So it's really all about educating. Again, both myself and Stephen wouldn't be the same people we are, I would bet, without good educators to and without talking about risky issues. Does that make sense? I'm sure it does. Next slide, I think. Oh, next bullet point. All right. Without risk, we fail to know, and this is just what I was talking about, our true potential, right? Again, I wouldn't be the person I am. And even though Stephen is an emerging adult, right? He's an emerging adult, he wouldn't be the person he is without having taken the risk to even come to college, right? Does that make sense? All right. Now I think we're to the next slides. All right. Now, Dr. Megan Marie Croton, I pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Chris. And there's a whole paper we have that kind of fleshes out those ideas further if you want to read more into it. But now we're going to kind of talk about what dignity of risk looks like for college students. And so this photo is of a person pushing someone in a wheelchair, and they are just smothered in pillows. So kind of similar to that bubble wrapped person we saw in the beginning, when we overprotect people with disabilities and go give them the opportunities to really live life. Next slide, please. So we developed this model of dignity of risk because dignity of risk was very different depending on the student, depending on the context. So we looked at the literature about risk and inclusive post-secondary ed and dignity of risk. And then as a team, we developed this model that I'm going to show you on this next slide. And who Chris was describing informed the model. Those people were included in the development of the model I'm about to show you. So next slide. So here is our model for dignity of risk and inclusive post-secondary education. So on your left-hand side is more segregated manufactured risk. And so when we're thinking about risk and inclusive post-secondary education, or really any context, we want to think about four main things. So context, where students are, choice, what choices the student has, the supports and services available to the student, as well as the ones student are accessing, and then the student's access to consequences, whether that be positive or negative. So on the left-hand side is more manufactured risk. And this is where students are going to be in, can I zoom in? Sorry, I can't zoom in, but there should be a link that you should be able to get to this in the HyperDoc. So manufactured risk are when students are in more segregated settings. They don't really have any choices. They're told what to do. They only access what's available to their inclusive post-secondary ed program. So it's just them and their program kind of on an island. And they don't really have any opportunities to experience consequences. So they make a poor choice and it's okay. Everybody solves it for them. We protect them from that negative consequence. But that also means they don't have access to those positive consequences of, hey, I took a risk and this really awesome thing happened. I made a new friend. I found a new place on campus. So on the other side, the authentic risk is a more inclusive context. So this is where students with disabilities are surrounded by their peers with and without disabilities. They are making the final decisions for themselves, although they still might be seeking input from others, because let's be honest, we all seek input from our peers and our supports to make our own decisions. Students have access to supports that are available to all campus members. So they're accessing those supports that everybody else would be accessing. And they have opportunities for short and long-term consequences. So they ate the entire cake for dinner, they have a short-term stomach ache, or they learn how to cook and they have the long-term consequences of learning how to cook. Now, this model, there's nothing wrong with any of these levels of risk. It's really important to note that. And students will move in and out of all of these levels depending on the context and dependent on their own individualized support needs. All right, next slide, please. So, Stephen, I know you and Chris talked about these, so I'm going to be quiet and let you share a little bit about your perspective.
Okay. So the types of risks that I've taken in college was moving into the dorms and deciding whether or not if I want to continue on after this year into a degree program. And then also like getting a job on campus. And I'm going to move on to an apartment on campus next year. And that's a big risk that I'm taking. And all of this has helped me become more independent in the long run.
Stevie, can I throw a curveball?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever feel nervous about it?
Yes, I felt nervous about deciding whether or not if I want to go on and do a degree program or not. And then I decided that I want to, but it's going to take a lot of hard work and I'm still, kind of scared, kind of nervous. But I know I can do this. I got this because I got the support from the Succeed staff and the College of Ed staff.
Cool. Thank you.
That's awesome, Stephen. And were you nervous when you first came to college?
Oh, yes, big time.
And how do you feel you've become more independent since you started Succeed?
Yes, I have. I definitely have.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Stephen. All right. And we'll have more time for Q&A. So if anybody has more questions for Stephen, we can talk more thoroughly about that. Thank you. So next slide, please. All right, so and if you could click next, I think an image should show up. Oh, okay, we're gonna go through the 5. You can just go put all 5 on here. So we're gonna go through a 5-step process that we talked about. So we looked at our own process at Succeed. And we thought, how do we try to enable risk? And what does the literature say? And we came up with these 5 steps to help inclusive post-secondary ed programs really think through how they're providing opportunities for risk and provide a tool that you could use to identify strategies to move towards more authentic risk, that right side, more inclusive side. All right, next slide, please. So in that HyperDoc, thank you, Liz, was right on time. There is a handout. And so this handout is to help, has all of the guiding questions that I'm about to go over. It also has data collection plans. So for each of these steps, you're going to want to be thoughtful about collecting data from a diverse range of stakeholders in a variety of different ways. Once you've collected that data, then you can write your program notes in that right-hand column. So click on the HyperDoc and you can kind of fill this out when you have time. All right, next slide. All right, so first thing we need to do is identify our areas for growth. So where do we as a program want to enable more opportunities for students in our program to take reasonable risks? So first thing we need to do is understand, well, what are our current levels of risk? And that is kind of, this question is really why we developed that continuum, because we know risk looks different in different contexts with different people. And we wanted to kind of give kind of like a grounding to, okay, well, where are we right now? Then we want to identify, well, what areas do students want more opportunities to make their own decisions? So a great time to think about this is person-centered planning. For us personally, previously, I think when the program first started, students lived, all Succeed students lived in like a collective learning community on one floor. And in person-centered planning meetings, they said, hey, I don't want to do this. I want to be with my peers. So the program took that feedback and said, okay, this is an area where we could really provide more opportunities for risk. So listen to the students. What do they want to do? Also look around what is going on with other college students. So what other risks are students without intellectual disabilities taking? And then identify as a team with your students and your stakeholders, where can we enable more authentic risk? Maybe we're not going to make it all the way to that right side where it's authentic and students are making their completely own decisions and, you know, all of those completely independent, but let's try to get a little bit closer and how can we maybe think about the context or the support students are receiving. So we got to first identify our area for growth. All right, next slide. So step 2 is we need to understand the risks and rewards for both students and partners. So we want to understand potential physical risks, emotional risks, and economic risks. So physical risk could be, if I start working out every day, I'm going to get super buff. Or if I eat an entire chocolate cake, I'm going to have a really bad stomach ache. Emotional risk. So I'm in a really abusive friendship. What happens if I set boundaries? Or what if I go to homecoming for the first time with no friends? What are my potential emotional risks and rewards? Economic, big one in college is, how am I going to pay for things and stay at college? I'm sure most program members here, it's all about that big jump in the beginning is figuring out your meal plan, right? So understanding what you're going to do so that everybody is not bankrupt by the end. So we want to understand what the risks and the rewards are for students, because we want to understand, okay, this might feel really scary, like Stephen mentioned, this might be really scary to continue on to get your degree, but what's the reward? Stephen can get a degree, he can get a better job, he gets more training, an internship with something he loves, right? More opportunities to make new friends. There's so many risks. And sometimes when we're talking about dignity of risks and these big decisions, we forget about all the rewards and all the wonderful things that could happen because we're scared. And that fear is very normal. So we focus on the students first. But we also have to identify stakeholders' beliefs about the physical, emotional, or economic risks, because we have parents involved and staff members involved. And this is really important for us to reflect on, okay, well, what am I scared of? What am I worried is going to happen to Stephen? But what do I think are the incredible things that are going to happen to Stephen? As I have a student with, you know, I have a child with a disability. What happens if they become more independent and they don't need me anymore? What are those risks and rewards look like? Because if we have a really good understanding of how everybody feels about this situation, we're going to be able to move forward. All right, next slide. So step 3 is we want to evaluate and identify natural and supplemental supports. So first we want to understand what supports are readily available that enable risk for all students. And this is kind of the really cool thing about college, right? So college is not high school. You know, a lot of students live on campus. There's lots of opportunities for freedoms and there's lots of opportunity to risk. But a college campus is a contained system. There are supports that ensure that nothing catastrophic, most of the time, happens to students. So for example, one that we frequently use at Succeed is, I'll go to the meal plan example, right? So a lot of times students come in those first few weeks and there's freedom, right? I can eat whatever I want, whenever I want, and there's all these wonderful options, and they spend through their meal plan the first week. So we resist trying to save the student from feeling uncomfortable, and we say, okay, well, there are some supports on campus for students who don't have food. So here are the supports. So here's the food pantry. You can go get lunch. Here are low food cost options. The supports that are available to everybody at the university. But we know that all of those supports are not accessible, right? So we have to think about what supplemental supports do we need to provide students so that they are able to access those natural supports. So for one, when we're thinking about residential housing, which the paper that's linked in the document focuses on inclusive housing. So at UMSL, we try to have Succeed students go through as natural of a process selecting their roommates as everybody else. But one thing we have found is that it's really hard for Succeed students to identify kind of their preferences. So do I like to stay up late? Do I like to stay up early? Do I like the room hot? Do I like it cold? Am I loud? Am I quiet? Am I messy? So we have an additional meet and greet time where we help students work through, okay, what are your preferences? What are your interests? How can we get the best information from you about what you want in a roommate? And then how can we give that information to the Res Life so they can pick a good match for you? So we provide a supplemental support, but our students still go through the same process as everybody else. All right, next slide. Then we want to enable access to natural consequences. So first one of the steps is thinking about, well, what are the potential consequences that students with and without disabilities would experience? So if I was going to do a really bad one. For some reason, I was going to say, if you cross the street without looking, you get hit by a car, but that went too far with the risk. We want to provide access to consequences because that's how we learn, right? So going back to that food option, that first week, if you spend all your money and Friday, you're like, oh, shoot, I don't have money to go out with my friends to the movies, or, I would love a Friday treat, but I can't do it. Next week, I'm going to get better. So we often learn from our consequences, right? I wish I could see you all, but I'm sure in the chat, you can say, y'all made mistakes, right? And you've all learned from those consequences. But oftentimes with students with disabilities, we want to protect them from those consequences. We get mother bear on them. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable. But when we do that, we don't provide them those opportunities to learn from their consequences. And then we want to think of how can we make sure that students have access to those consequences. One that frequently comes up is people say, well, how often do Succeed students get expelled or kicked out? And we don't. We really have not had any students get kicked out, but we do help students if they have to go through we require students to follow the campus code of conduct. And so if students do something that violates the code of conduct, we support them through that process. So we have meetings with them to help them understand, okay, this is what you did. This is how it broke the code of conduct. Here are some better options in the future. Which ones feel right for you? And then we might go to meetings with them or support them through those consequences, but we still uphold them to the same standards that every other student at UMSL would. Same thing with roommates. I was just talking to a Res Life person yesterday, and she was so kind, and she's like, well, I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable with their roommate, and I want to have better roommate matches. And I was like, that is wonderful. Thank you. I agree. But that bad roommate sometimes is a part of college life, right? I mean, I remember going to camp when I was in middle school and I had a horrible roommate. I had to deal with it. So we support students with dealing with those by saying, okay, well, who can you go to? Go to your residential advisor, talk to them about the issue. Let's have some mediation. And you know what? If it doesn't work, we'll move you to another room. But you're going to go through you're going to experience what that conflict resolution is, just like every other student at UMSL. All right, next slide. So once we've gone through this process is very cyclical. We're going to reflect because that's what we do as educators, right? and plan for more authentic risk. So maybe we went from completely manufactured to now students have a few more options, but they don't have complete control over what their decision is. But we want to think of what level of risk are we at now, and what barriers need to be addressed to enable a more authentic risk. This might be helping faculty better understand how to include students in their classrooms. It might be training residential advisors to understand how to be more inclusive in the residence hall. It might be training parents to take a step back and be okay with your students making mistakes. And then that's how you make a plan. How are we going to move towards more authentic risk? And we're going to focus on the student and helping them reach their own individualized goals. All right, next slide. So as I mentioned, we have our guiding questions. We're in the first column of the data sheet, and then the data collection is in the second. So how can we collect data? A really great time to bring this up is person-centered planning. So just saying, hey, Stephen, where do you want to make more opportunities to make your own choices? Where do you feel like you are being smothered? You know, students know best. They know, right? Stephen, you can tell exactly when you areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you might want to meet or interview stakeholders, including faculty or staff, parents, current and former students. Some former students might be like, you know, I really wish I would have had more opportunities to use public transportation in the program. I wish I would have been able to get off campus. So those feedback from those stakeholders can help. Conduct surveys that are anonymous. You can observe students with and without disabilities. So if you're curious and you say, okay, well, you know, our res life is not as inclusive as it could be. There's needs to be more opportunities for risk. Go to the hall, go to the res life hall and see, okay, what is everybody doing? And are our students with disabilities doing the same thing as everybody else? One thing that's very common we find in programs are like room checks. Like, okay, well, we're going to make sure that everybody's okay, right? So we're going to go on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and make sure that all of our students' rooms are clean, tidy, yada, yada, yada. But no one else at the university has to do that, right? And so if you went and you saw, oh, well, everybody else isn't having their room checked. Maybe we're bubble wrapping a little bit. Like, let's let Megan let her room get messy, right? Because then she's going to figure out, oh, this is gross. I don't want to live this way. I want it clean, right? So observations can be helpful. And then ecological inventories, which really looks at the environment and looks at opportunities for more rules. All right, next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, that model, the four levels of risk, students are going to move along that continuum throughout their day, across time and context. It's going to depend on the support available. It's going to depend on their tolerance for risk. There might be somebody who is really a socially outgoing person, and so maybe they don't need a lot of support in some areas, but they're really they're scared to travel alone, so they might need support to use the public transportation. There's no bad or wrong level of risk. So if there's manufactured risk because you really have to keep a student safe because there's a physical reason, without a doubt, there will come up an example where there's just like, well, what if this happens? And it's like a catastrophic example, right? Like, well, what if the kid gets kicked out and is homeless and blah, blah. We don't want to throw students or anybody in the deep end without safety floats, right? Just please know there's no wrong level of risk. We provide that continuum to really help you understand, well, what are the ways I can move a little bit more inclusive, a little bit more towards offering more opportunities for risk. And then when thinking about supports, I was a former high school teacher. I'm a professor now. The easiest thing to do is provide support to everybody, right? So I'm just going to support everybody in the same way. But individualized support is really important for dignity of risk because of kind of some of those things I mentioned, that every student's going to have a different tolerance for risk. Some are going to be very prone to take risking, and maybe they need help reeling it in a little bit in college. Other students are going to be really hesitant to make risks, and they're going to need to support and encouragement to take that leap. So really trying to individualize the support provided and helping them access those natural support should be individualized. All right, I think, next slide, I think we go back to Stephen, right? So Stephen, there's 37 people on here, and I could tell from the chat, there are a lot of program staff here. What advice would you give program staff about how to support students to take risks during college?
Don't hover over your students. Let them, take control of their life and their decisions. If they come to you and ask for help, listen to them. And then do what they're asking you. Don't do too much, but also don't do too little. Yeah. And just don't overstep. Just, say good. Yeah. But just listen to your students.
Do you have this might be a really hard question. Do you have any advice for how program staff can realize when they're overstepping?
If they can realize oh, maybe they're doing stuff for the student and the student isn't doing it for themselves.
Yeah.
Or if the student is starting to get fidgety or antsy, let them do it. Don't do it for them, whatever that may be.
Yeah, Chris, do you have any follow-up questions or comments about anything I said?
I just I think that we need to normalize the idea of failing, right? So my pillar, the pillar that I teach in, is the academic pillar. And I have students who choose to go to baseball games instead of going to class, right? So I'm not going to chase after them, right? They understand. I'm going to clarify the rules of the classroom and talk about the agreements that we made, but I'm not going to chase after them so that they see some natural consequence. Did that make sense? Did I add too much?
No, that's perfect. Stephen, do you have any examples that you would be willing to share of maybe sometime you took a risk and it didn't turn out how you thought, but you ended up learning a lot?
No, not really, because the risk I've taken so far has turned out to be good.
Awesome.
But these next risks that I'm going to be taking next year, who knows? Hopefully they're good.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, great. Well, next, does anybody have any questions for Stephen about his experiences? I know I'm opening it up a little early to questions. All right, well, we'll move to the next slide. We're going to open up to Q&A in just a minute. I believe Liz has a
poll. Yes. We have a poll. Singy's launching a poll so we can get your feedback on this session, and you can take a minute or two to just fill that out, and then we'll move into the Q&A, and we'll just take a minute to pause to let you do that. Great. Thanks, everybody. Yep, definitely keep doing that. And we appreciate your feedback. And for the Q&A, we would just appreciate if you could put questions in the chat. And we will just have an open discussion. And any questions for any of the speakers?
Megan, I have a question.
yeah.
Could you talk or go a little bit deeper into the sort of the level of risk? Because there are, all risk isn't the same, or all actions or decisions have different levels of risk. So there's some that are maybe low frequency, low, impact or consequences, if you will, so that maybe those talk about how as through this model that you've developed and what you're doing at Emsl, there's maybe some things that you can identify that It's just part of the college experience, and it's okay to just let them experience that and then address it if it does come up, as opposed to something that might be high risk, high probability, where, yeah, maybe we need to, build some things around that for support.
Yeah, definitely. You brought up a really great question. And so as much as I propose, the steps as a way to plan for more risk, our hopes are also that when thinking about programming and thinking about the supports to provide students, that you can use this to almost kind of do what you described. Do we even need to intervene? Like, what are other students doing? Is this an opportunity for the student to make their own decision, experience those consequences? And what's the student's tolerance for risk, right? So if there's a student who maybe has really significant emotional supports, and seeing their balance on their food card really low is going to make them spiral, and it's going to be a serious mental health issue, then we're going to really want to provide supports, right? And we're going to want to really individualize those supports and minimize that risk. But other students, it might not be as significant of a consequence for them. And then let them learn, let them experience that consequence, because maybe the risk is just a little bit of discomfort, a phone call to mom, or mom's not going to be happy. But it's important that that student has that opportunity. So yes, the continuum very much is, there are small risks that, you just give you a tummy ache. There's other ones where you end up in jail. And so we really have to think about that when thinking about the supports we provide and where we intervene. And I have a feeling Chris has some more to add to that.
Yeah. I'm a student with developmental disability, and I was wild in college. Probably Dr. Rooney Crone would be like, what? Maybe not. But that wildness might have landed me in some hot water, right? But I kind of needed even that extreme to become the person that I am. So I think we really have to measure it goes back to not putting our own values into the equation, but really having conversations with the student and then the student support staff. Did that make sense? You want to cushion that a little bit, Megan?
Yeah, no, I think that was great. And I think the other key thing to think about is like reasonable, authentic risk, right? So we want to make sure that students have the same opportunities for risk as everybody else. And there are some situations where students might be engaging in like really risky behavior. It's like, okay, well, everybody's not doing that. And maybe we need to step in and make sure that this student is safe by educating them, providing them supports, and providing them access to additional supports. Stephen, do you have anything to add about that? How there's just kind of very different types of risks throughout the day and in your life?
Yeah, like I take risks different from other people. It just depends on the person. Some people go extreme, some people don't really go.
Yeah, some people are really shy.
Yeah.
And risk could be different. So Stephen, I have a feeling you don't have this problem. It sounds like you're pretty sociable.
Yeah, I am.
So that's not really a risk for you, right? But maybe for someone who has social anxiety, that could be a big risk.
That could be. Yes.
I have a question, just to follow up on who is most challenging to work with, or has the most difficulty adjusting to having risk on campus? Is it other students? Is it the students with the disabilities? Is it the parents? Is it staff? I'm just curious where you run into the most kind of adjustment to having more risk.
Yeah, I will say, I think staff and faculty, we have to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. So we have to make sure we're doing it, what we say we're going to do. But the biggest challenge are administrators. So when we go and say, okay, well, we want to shift our program, or we want, I know it was a big deal when we said, okay, well, our students are in this one hallway and that is segregation. We would like it to be more included. Admin get really nervous because they have a lot of liability. And so they get very nervous. But also parents, I'm finishing analysis right now. We interviewed parents about their experiences, kind of letting go and letting students make mistakes and, fly the nest. And it's really, really hard for parents, and understandably so, because parents, what we're finding, it's very obvious. I mean, it seems very obvious, is for 18 years, parents are fierce advocates, right? Like they have to fight at every corner for their students to be included. They have to advocate. And then they come to college and we're like, nope, adios parents. Now, let us have your kid and let them, we're going to give them all these opportunities for freedom. So it's very hard for parents. And that's why that one item, risks and benefits for other stakeholders, is really, really important, because as a program, you have to support those other stakeholders in getting there too, because otherwise we bubble wrap our students. And so, yeah, parents, it can be very challenging, and I'll let Chris add to that.
And we provide, I've spoken at several parent sort of roundtables every semester, where we try to not just allay fears, right? Although the research might point that the fear is pretty strong, but we really do try to provide educational opportunities for them to shift to being supporters instead of being caregivers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so we have an initial parent training where we try to provide them with an opportunity to handle a lot of their emotional things they are dealing with their students going to college, and then also provide them with tools and language to be an advisor versus the caregiver. So providing with opportunities like, I will provide feedback to you, I will support you, but as a parent, I'm no longer making the decision for you. That is Steven's decision, because parents don't live in the dorms with Steven. Steven gets to pick when he goes to bed and if he wakes up and goes to class.
Right.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
I have a question for Steven. Steven,
Uh-huh.
because risk is connected to learning, right? So if you're not taking risk, it's maybe limiting your opportunities to learn. And then also connected to learning is your self-confidence, your confidence, right? In terms of making decisions and learning and just having that opportunity. Can you talk about how going to college, I know you've talked about you were nervous going into college, and now as you're continuing to pursue a degree, but can you talk to us about sort of the impact the decision to go to college and having attended has on your confidence as a person?
So like coming here, obviously, like you said and I said before, I was nervous at the beginning, but what like made me not nervous was meeting new friends, making connections with staff and like some of the Res Life staff, and just like having people to talk to and get through those tough times. And then now I'm like, yes, I still need them, but like I feel like now I can actually do this, because I made those connections and I've established those relationships with other people.
And just as a follow-up, did it help reinforce to you to sort of underscore that, hey, I can do this? I'm more than capable.
Yes, I definitely feel that this year more so than I did last year. And I feel like that feeling would just get stronger as time goes on, and I overcome more risk and I accomplish a lot more.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Stephen, I have a follow-up question for you now.
Uh-huh.
So oftentimes when we think about supporting people with disabilities, we assume like we have to be independent, right? Like we have to make everybody super independent. And you hit on such an important thing that you have your family, you have your friends, you have all these incredible supports, which we all do. So could you tell us a little bit about some of the people who are important in your life and how they support you in being independent and reaching your goals?
One of them is my aunt, and like she's like a big supporter. She always she was a big supporter of me going to college. And like if ever I need advice on something, I always text her, call her up. And like she's usually right there. And then like people that I met here at Oak Hall, I can like go up to their room, or I see them in the hallway, or I can like call them or text them up. If ever I need something, they usually all know what to say.
Thank
So
you.
like everyone's either like a phone call away or like a couple steps away.
Yeah, and then they help give you some advice of what should I do? And
Yes, yes.
so what other questions do you all have? What are some of your initial reactions? I usually, when I teach this to students, I usually have two pictures where it's the David Rose from Schitt's Creek where he's like, "Ew, no," or Leslie Knope who's like, "Yeah, I got it." So what are how are you responding to this? Is it really uncomfortable? Does it align with your program goals?
I see somebody has their hand up and
Oh yeah, Kara.
yeah, okay.
I really enjoyed the presentation. I'm a current college student like Stephen, and a lot of what you were talking about made me think about the idea of universal design, because all of these supports and like that you're talking about would have benefited like me and all of my friends, and would just be really helpful like regardless. And so I feel like it would be cool to see colleges take these programs and expand it so that every student is equipped, whether or not you have a documented disability, because the transition to college is rough. And I agree with Stephen. I was super scared coming to school and then transitioning to an apartment and figuring out like, dang, I have to cook for myself every day. Like it doesn't stop. That was the worst. And so having that support, I think, would just be really beneficial. And hopefully, I really think it would help with retention and students being able to stay in school and manage their finances, because that's a really rough transition, even though it happens in a contained environment. And so that's just something I would promote to program directors or whoever is on this call. Is this would I think this would not only benefit students with disabilities, but all students regardless. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Kara. And it just, when we think about college, and like college is a big scary transition, right? And we sometimes, if we focus too much on the risks and like, oh, what if all the bad things will happen, we'll forget all these amazing things that could happen. And I teach a transition course, and Succeed students are in my course. And those first couple weeks, I level with them. I'm like, yeah, I was crying in my dorm. When I was a freshman, I was crying in my dorm because I had no friends. I didn't know what I was doing. I was looking into like trying to go do service in another country because it was awful. But like just normalize it. Like college is hard and everybody has supports, but we all can do it if we just support each other. And make sure everybody can have access to those supports. That's the important thing. Chris, were you gonna say something?
When I first got to college, my vocational rehabilitation counselor dropped me off in a van, and I laid in the middle of my dorm room crying, not because I was sad, but just because I was overwhelmed by everything that was happening. So I feel this conversation, very good. That's all.
Yeah, and college is that like perfect place where like, Chris, you weren't dropped off in an apartment in the middle of nowhere. You were off, well, hopefully you were dropped off at a residence hall where there's like people there to support you. And that's why college is such an incredible experience for everybody, because there are those supports for everybody that minimize risk before complete independence after graduation.
Yeah, I should have clarified it was a dorm room. So
I was assuming, but assuming doesn't always go well.
yeah, I know.
What are some other reactions? Are there any things in your program that you're thinking of that like you want to talk through? Because some of the times this gets very nuanced.
Well, as a parent, I think this is great, right? I mean, it's all about shifting. It's shifting that, at least from a parent perspective, it's shifting that perspective of, kind of parenting to advising, and really having to figure out how to step back and not that you go away completely, but you're still supporting, but it's different, right? And I think this is it's good. It's a good thing.
Definitely. I just always try to think of myself, okay, well, what would be going on for other students, and how would other students experience this uncomfortably? Like we don't want to let students, have experience unneeded, stress or whatever. But if this is a normal part of college, let students experience college, the good, bad, and the ugly, but mostly good. It's fun, right?
I have a question about the kinds of experiences that students come to college with are probably very different. But what have you all and Stephen, what and Chris can speak to this too, as students, just what was most beneficial, or what were the things that you did before college that prepared you for the risks that you were taking in college?
Stephen, do you want to start?
Sure. Probably the supports that I got in high school, because my case manager introduced the program to me and to my family, and basically like the support of applying, and like the support through all of that and from high school, that really helped me.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
think for me, the support of my vocational rehabilitation. I had a really sort of progressive counselor, so that was very helpful. And yeah, I think that was a key. That was a key buoy in my life before college.
Like that buoy analogy. I'm going to just make a quick announcement that please do fill out the poll if you haven't already and you are so inclined. We appreciate your feedback. And then we will, I just wanted to thank everyone for attending. We had a great turnout, and we're so grateful for Chris and Megan and Stephen for being here. And we're going to keep on talking for about 15 more minutes. But we understand that some people need to leave at 4, so we just wanted to close that part of the presentation out, and thank you for coming.